Hi, I'm Lily, and it has been a hot minute. I am sorry about that. As you probably know, I do try to update one or two shorts every single day so that you know something about what's happening. But I gotta admit, I keep forgetting about the devlogs. So today I'm gonna try to get you pretty much up to speed with what's happening. And if you do want to see like the very latest news all the time, you can join the Discord server. That also gives you the chance to help out naming things and voicing your opinion. So there's a link for that, of course. Since the last devlog, I have mainly kept on working on Curious Calvin. And if you're here only for updates about Calvin, then now is the time to jump to the time on the screen. Because I do want to tell you about something else first. If you remember, I was in a game jam back in March, it feels like forever ago already, and I spent almost an entire month on making the game No Second Opinion. This was the very first game that I completed, and yes, admittedly, it is really goofy and very short, but I still love it, and I'm very glad that I did join the game jam because I learned a lot and I pushed myself much more than usual, so I got out of my comfort zone. But the thing is, not long after I completed No Second Opinion, I actually joined a second game jam. Only a few people knew that I was working on this project because I was so very unsure if I would be able to complete it. Because first of all, the game jam was only running for one single week and I was busy for a few of those days, so I couldn't even use the entire time for this project. And secondly, the main challenge was to do something you have never tried before. And instead of choosing something logical and keeping the scope small, I decided to try to learn 3D. Because I've never worked on 3D before, apart from one tutorial that I completely messed up, so let's please just forget about that. I knew that it was practically impossible for me to finish a 3D game in the set period of time, but I still wanted to try. The two themes for the game jam was space and flower. So I made a prototype growing flowers on a space station. I know that sounds weird and it looks pretty damn terrible, but it was actually kind of fun in a strange way. And I completely fell in love with being able to build a wonky and honestly kind of ugly world, and then actually being able to walk around in it. Crazy. A big part of me wants to continue the project after the game jam, but there isn't enough time for everything. So back to Calvin. Looking back at how Curious Calvin started, everything looks so incredibly different now. So, what happened since the last devlog, you might ask? Well, at that point, I had sunk roughly 200 hours into the game. Now, I'm at almost 450 hours. I visually had a plan both for Calvin and the world around him, even though not all of it is in the game yet, but it will be eventually. I started with adding a very basic idea on how I actually wanted him to look, just to get used to that instead of the little blob version that's been there since day one. If you were in the first playtest, you might remember the bubble poofs, the strange plant thing that explode in pretty colors when you run through them. I got some feedback regarding them, basically that they felt unnecessary since they at the time did not really have a use. So for a short time I actually removed them from the game, but honestly, this made me a little sad because it felt empty without them. But I managed to come up with an idea on how to give them an actual use. Ever since the beginning, I've tried to be very clear about how Calvin will not be fighting bosses and killing things. He is a careful and kind little thing after all. But it's also important to me that the player has ways to try to keep him safe. As the very first step, I added a shield around him. I also added icons at the bottom of the screen, so it's possible to keep track on how much energy is both gathered and needed. I then moved on to adding dash, and I know that some people call it run speed increase, but it's so long to say, and I'm an old World of Warcraft player, so it's dash to me. There's no discussion around it. And I started playing around with something that I call the bubble cannon. When you hit an enemy with it, the enemy is tranquilized for a couple of seconds, making it easier to sneak away. At this point though, the amount of shots were completely unlimited, something that was incredibly fun to play around with, but also very overpowered, so I had to limit them, of course. I just wasn't completely sure how I wanted the counter to look. I knew that I wanted it all to be at the bottom of the screen, so you have all the information in one place apart from health. But I had the hardest time deciding, and in the end, it was put at the top of the screen instead. Instead of stressing more about this, I moved on to fine-tuning Calvin's dash. Ever since the beginning, he's moved faster in his green version, while moving slower but jumping higher in the red version. The previous dash amplified this in a good way, and even though Calvin now looks different, I wanted to keep the same feel of the movement. I also reworked the wall climbing ability that is a part of the red dash, so now it's really smooth and easy to use. At this point, I was almost 300 hours into the project, and it was time to start trying to animate Calvin's movements, because I did not want to keep him scooting around as a static picture. Thing is though, I have never animated anything before, but it was a very fun experience. I enjoyed it very much, even though it took way longer than it should. But I do want to make more of it. I've always had kind of a vision on how I want Calvin to look, even though I had no idea how to bring that picture from inside my head and into Godot in the very beginning. But now I seem to have found a good way to make him justice. Even though I am going to redo the sprites at some point to be able to add details and make sure that he really feels like he belongs in these tunnels. But for now, I'm very happy with the progress, so he's gonna look like this for a bit. It's always been very important to me that he's cute and lovable, because he's never ever going to be a dangerous big fella or a hero with weapons and stuff. He's just this little creature that knows that if he's not careful in the tunnels, he won't make it. He's both kind-hearted and curious, so on one hand, he wants to help the other creatures that he runs into, but he also wants to know what else is out there, what's in the tunnels that he's never visited, and what's on the surface. After adding most of the animations, I returned to the poof cannon situation. I never ever liked having the counter at the top of the screen, so I managed to move it down again. And when I limited the max number to 6, I finally figured out a way to show all the different energies at the bottom of the screen without it being overwhelming or strange. With this change, it also doesn't feel quite as overpowered anymore. While I was at it, I added some small details too, like new keybinds for abilities and little pictures showing what button to press if you would ever forget. I also added little lines for the dash bubbles at the bottom, but then I also decided to add something I call the bank. And basically, if you walk through a heart flower and you're already almost at full health, a maximum of 3 extra health gets saved in the bank. And then if you take damage from something, you can press E to just heal up again. It's a really nice lifesaver. Another lifesaver, at least for my own sanity, was to rework the collision on all the rocks in the game, because even though I have coyotes set up and you technically won't miss your jumps, there are situations where you just freaking fall because technically there is no ground under you, because both the rocks and Calvin have such strange shapes. But with this sorted, the movement finally feels a lot better. I then did a 180 and returned to the bubble poofs again. Because as I mentioned before, I felt that they were making the different abilities very overpowered, since in theory, you could get as much energy as you wanted if you just kept walking through them. Now you can only get 2 charges from each bubble poof, and then you need to continue the journey and find more along the way. And on that journey, you will get into boss encounters, but as I mentioned, it's not going to be the traditional use weapons and abilities and blah 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 to kill a boss kind of thing. No, instead, every boss encounter, one or more creatures will in some way need Calvin's help. And that's what you'll do, you will help. And I know that you're here for behind the scenes stuff, but I'm actually not going to show you too much from these encounters because I want you to be able to try them out while not knowing everything beforehand. So far, 2 encounters are more or less completed. A long time ago, I said that I feel like a fraud making devlogs because I don't really know if I can call myself a game developer just yet. But I am very happy to say that it is now possible to support me by wishlisting Curious Calvin on Steam. My goal is to release the game before the end of 2026. But before then, I will have the next playtest on Steam actually. And following that, there will also be a demo coming up before the release, of course. So if you want to try the game before the release, I do recommend that you wishlist it. And thank you if you do. As well as join the Discord server so you can help naming creatures and be a part of the development in one way or another. And you can also there be a part of an amazingly sweet community. Thank you very much for watching. I really hope you'll continue following this crazy journey, and I will update more frequently, I promise. Take care out there. Bye!